Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jarrell Mason, aka Jay Mason. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Album Cover, where we get inside the entertainment industry with those in the know and give them flowers to be celebrated. With me right now, I have an acclaimed director. His films such as Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes, If 50 Shoots, I'm a Man, Black Masculinity in America, Barack and Curtis, and the latter two films were seen nationally on PBS, Soul Food Junkies, and Hazing. And we're going to get into the intersectionality between films, music, sports, hip hop, all that and then some with acclaimed director and jack of all trades, master of none, Byron Hurt. Mr. Hurt, welcome to Beyond the Album Cover, sir, and this is long overdue.
Thanks a lot, brother, man. It's good to see you. I'm glad that you finally made it happen. Let's do it.
Yes, sir. I'm glad that we were able to finally link up and make it happen. So, being raised in Central Islip, did I pronounce it correctly? Central Islip.
Correct.
Central Islip, New York, and that's close towards Long Island, not too far from Wyandanch, New York. And if you know your hip hop scene, EPMD, I believe Rakim is out of Wyandanch. And what was it like for you being in that atmosphere, and especially in the midst of when hip hop was on the rise and being at the scene and seeing everything that was coming out?
So yeah, I grew up in a town called Central Islip, Long Island, and in New York. And so I grew up around hip hop artists. I went to school with Keith Murray, who was younger than me. But I knew Keith. And so it was great to see Keith sort of find his place in hip hop, especially when he connected with Eric Sermon and Paris Smith from EPMD. I also went to school with K Solo, who was a solo artist, but was also connected to EPMD as well. I grew up around Eric and Parrish. They lived in Brentwood. I lived in Central Islip. Biz Marquis was somebody that we saw all of the time walking around in our high school, walking around Central Islip. He shot two music videos out on Long Island. One of them, The Vapors, was shot at the Noble Street Park where we used to play ball all of the time. He shot another video. Um, I think You Got What I Need. I don't know
Just a friend.
Just a Friend. He shot that video at New York Tech in Central Islip. So I mean, I grew up around hip hop. Of course, De La Soul from Amityville, Rakim being from Wyandanch, the leaders of the new school featuring Busta Rhymes. Hip hop was a part of my youth and my teenage years growing up, and that's the music that we listened to.
And wasn't Groove Beat Chill from around Wyandanch as well?
That I don't know. I mean, it's possible, but I don't really have them associated with Wyandanch.
And you mentioned Biz Marquee, RIP, and a lot of the Juice Crew. Juice
Yeah,
Crew just lost.
and also TJ Swan. This is who I want to mention because TJ Swan also lived in Central Islip. TJ Swan recently passed away, but he was down with Biz Markie. I mean, he was the voice of he was the R&B voice of the many hip hop records. He was featured on Biz Marquie's songs several times. So yeah, I mean, TJ Swan was also somebody who we were really proud to say that we knew, in Central Islip.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned TJ Swan. I know it was a little bit after his passing that Marley Marl had went on BLS and played some of the unreleased TJ Swan demos because he
Yeah.
was gonna cut a record and he actually had a deal lined up with Arista.
Yeah. And you know what? I cannot forget JVC Force. JVC Force who made the song Strong Island. You know what I'm saying? I knew those brothers. Billy Taylor, AJ Woodson, um, Kurt Kazal. I knew those brothers. I played the drums with Curtis, in the band. I hung out with AJ, you know what I'm saying? And I knew Billy Taylor. So they put Long Island on the map with that song Strong Island.
Right.
So, I cannot forget JBC Force.
Right. And you mentioned leaders of the new school, and I had heard a story that they were challenging a up and coming rap group at the time that was coming up under Public Enemy for the name that will eventually become Leaders of the New School. They ended up winning out the battle between this group, and that's how they got their name, Leader of the New School. And the group I believe they were battling was young black teenagers that had DJ Scribble, Cameron, who played Jamal, and House Party too, because I believe they came up under PE and the Bomb Squad, that whole camp.
Oh wow, okay. I'm not familiar with that story. Yeah. Well, you know, Chuck D coined the phrase Strong Island, but the JVC crew is the crew that put Strong Island really on the map in terms of the song.
Yeah, that's definitely dope right there. And I want to talk about how I think New Jersey often gets overlooked when we talk about hip hop because we look at, everything from New York out. But New
Yeah.
Jersey, Sugar Hill Records and of
Yeah.
course Redman, Queen Latifah, Naughty by Nature, Flavor Unit, all of the acts that came out of Jersey. I believe Apache, rest in peace, was from Jersey. Why is it that you feel so often New Jersey often doesn't get the credit that it does in hip hop and we look at it from New York out?
Well, because New Jersey is considered the armpit of New York City, you know what I mean? And so, you know, we always kind of play, you know, the back when I say we because I live in New Jersey now, but you know, I think people recognize a lot of the artistry that comes out of New Jersey. I mean, the Fugees, Lauryn Hill, you know what I'm saying? I mean, there's so many artists. I mean, like you mentioned Redman and all of those artists, Naughty by Nature, you know, Queen Latifah, what's the brother who's not he's like a city councilman in Newark.
Do it all from Lords of the Underground.
Do it all, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, these are all New Jersey artists, you know, Homegirl, Rod Digger, you know. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of really talented artists that came out of Newark.
And what was your take on seeing a lot of the elder statesmen of hip hop releasing content towards the end of 2024, all throughout 2024, like MC Light, Common, Pete Rock, Redman with Muddy Waters 2, MC Light, Rakim, LL, and
Mhm.
saying, I know my audience, I know myself, I'm gonna put it out, and y'all gonna accept it.
I love it, man. I think it's dope. You know, I think that Nas, what he did with Hit Boy was incredible. You know, Rakim dropped the album. Ghostface dropped the album, I believe, in 2024. I just saw a recent video with Nas encouraging old school artists to continue making art, continue making music. You know, Redman's album is a head nodder. You know, I think it's really, really dope. I love the Common Pete Rock joint. It's dope. It's a vibe. You know what I mean? I think Common really brings it lyrically. I think it's like, you know, the very best, you know, of Common. You know, he's showing that he can still do it. So, you know, I think you know, we tend to put our artists out the pasture for some reason, you know, when we shouldn't. I mean, you know, our artists are some of the brilliant individuals that we have in our community. And just because they're a certain age doesn't mean that they can no longer do what they do. So I love to see it and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'm definitely for that too. And I think one artist that doesn't get celebrated enough for his contributions to hip hop was
Hmm.
Heavy D.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking about Heavy D the other day. You know, Heavy D was an incredible artist whose music holds up over time, very talented performer. He was also, you know, he was also developing talent himself, actor. I mean, you know, Heavy D was a very talented guy.
And then also I would throw Prince Marky D, rest in peace, in that mix as well, because a lot of people don't know or should know that he, along with Corey Rooney, produced "Real Love" for Mary J. Blige, and most of the cuts off the 411 was the 411, and Mariah Carey "Butterfly," and the Free album with Prince Marky D and the Soul Convention, banger album, and just how he was more than just stick 'em. That boys, he had a
Right, right.
true ear for music, and pen game was nice too.
Yo, and Prince Marky D was a dope lyricist too, yo. I mean, he was nice. He was a dope MC.
Yeah, kind of know a lot of people tend to confuse him and Heavy D. And I think the whole Uptown movement with what RIP Andre Harrell, how
Uh-huh.
he was able to find that sweet spot with hip hop, R&B, New Jack Swing, and mesh that, and it created a masterpiece the way you see now Mary J. Blige in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, I mean, I think it was a beautiful thing to see Mary in the Hall of Fame. I didn't watch her performance. I DVR'd it. But you know, I love me some Mary J. Blige. I mean, Mary J. Blige is just, you know, she's Mary. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
love her.
yeah. I mean, she had that combination where the beats were hard enough for the fellas, and you had
Uh-huh.
the melodies for the ladies, and I believe the inspiration for what's the 411 kind of came from when Kid Capri put out that Impeach the President blend with Stephanie Mills, something in the way you make me feel, that
Uh,
mesh of hip hop and soul. And I'm gonna give you a little fun fact about Let Me Be the One by Intro. I had a
uh,
chance to interview Buddy White from Intro, and he
okay.
told me that that record was originally supposed to go on What's the 411 for Mary. But what
Wow.
happened was they had already turned it into MCA for Deadline,
Okay.
and Intro went ahead and cut that on their debut album.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's why they call her the queen of hip hop soul. You know what I'm saying? She was able to merge and blend those two genres.
yeah. All right. And I also know that you were pretty good with the pigskin, and I'm correct.
Yeah, well, growing up, I played football. I played football. I played basketball, ran track for a period of time. But football was my main sport. I also played tennis too
Okay.
when I was in junior high school. But football was my first love, and it was probably the sport that I was the best at. So yeah, I was able to play quarterback from the time I was about 9 to 10 years old. Coincidentally, I just ran into my Pee Wee football coach, PAL football coach the other day out here in New Jersey, and he reminded me that he was the coach that turned me into a quarterback. So I played quarterback from the time I was about 8, 9 years old, maybe I would say 9 years old through college.
Okay. And what were some of the schools that were looking at you as far as recruiting for QB?
Well, I had a lot of schools that were recruiting me at that time. Um, Syracuse, Temple, um, Boston University. I eventually went to Northeastern University, excuse me. Um, there were many, many schools that recruited me. Cornell, Colgate, Colorado, a lot of schools, Clemson, but those are some of the schools that were that recruited me. But I decided to go to Northeastern University in Boston because they were the only college that guaranteed that they would not change my position from quarterback. So that's one of the reasons why I went to Northeastern, excuse me, Northeastern, not Northwestern.
Okay, Northeastern University out in Boston. And I want to get your take. You mentioned Colorado, and we're seeing what Coach Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, is doing out in Colorado. And now
Mhm.
with Michael Vick getting the head coaching gig at Norfolk State, and then Deshaun Jackson landed the head coaching gig at Delaware State. What
Yeah,
do you think about the whole success with all these former athletes getting into the coaching space and really shedding the light on HBCUs and the PWI set in general in terms of college athletics?
I think it's great. I love it. I love Coach Prime. I love what he was able to do at Jackson State University. I love what he's doing at Colorado. I'll be following him and hoping for his success wherever he goes next. I think that he'll get opportunities to coach wherever he wants to coach, whether it's at the next level in the NFL. I think that he's really sort of provided an example and a model for other former Black football players, who may aspire to coach. I think, Mike Vick getting the job at Norfolk State University, I think is a great opportunity for him, and I hope he does well.
Yeah, I really hope that Vic does well, Deshaun Jackson does well at their positions. And also, we also have Eddie George down at Tennessee State doing
Yeah,
his thing down there. Now, you mentioned you picked Northeastern because they were the only school that said, we're going to play you at quarterback. No
yeah,
switching positions, because this is right around during the time where black quarterbacks still had to prove themselves to be able to
yeah.
play the position. And if you see the recent docuseries that Michael Vick put out about the evolution of the black quarterback, you can trace the lineage for the forefathers of black quarterbacks to present day, the Patrick Mahomes, the Lamar Jacksons, the Bryce Youngs, and how they had to endure a lot to get to where they are today. Where if you're not running and throwing, then you're pretty much obsolete in today's NFL or college game.
Yeah. I mean, I also wanted to make a film about Black quarterbacks. I had two projects that were on the table that I wanted to make about Black quarterbacks, but you are absolutely right. I mean, there has been the what we see today with Black quarterbacks in the NFL and in college is a result of decades of black quarterbacks pioneering at that position, having to prove and show that we were more than just runners, right? That we could think the game, that we could be cerebral quarterbacks, even though there's still some subtle jabs at black quarterbacks. That commentators will often refer to them as running quarterbacks or mobile quarterbacks or using their legs as opposed to using their brains. But yeah, I was sort of like in the middle swing of the emergence of black quarterbacks. I mean, there were definitely black quarterbacks that played before me, and I was inspired by many of those quarterbacks. One of the black quarterbacks that I really looked up to when I was in high school was Don McPherson, who played at Syracuse. Is one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Syracuse. I was a big Doug Williams fan. My number in high school was number 17.
Mhm.
My number when I went to college was number 8, and I wore that in honor of Vince Evans, who was a black quarterback for the Chicago Bears. So, I was a part of that wave of black quarterbacks who had to sort of prove that we could play the position and not be changed to a running back, excuse me, to a receiver or a defensive back.
Because when you also look at like Warren Moon, top
Hmm.
quarterback at Washington, led him to a Rose Bowl, wasn't
Yeah.
even picked in the NFL draft, had to go to Canada to prove his way, and then came
Yeah.
back, set the league on fire.
Yeah, Warren Moon is a great example of someone who had the ability. I mean, he had the sort of classic traditional quarterback body or mold. I mean, he was tall, he was strong. He was somebody who could be the face of a franchise, but it took him many, many years before he was given an opportunity to display his skill in the NFL. And that just speaks to the level of racism in the sport at that time. I mean, just think about what he would have done if he had started his entire career playing in the NFL, as opposed to spending some of his prime years in the Canadian Football League. And there were a lot of black quarterbacks who went to the Canadian Football League. Don McPherson is one of them who went to the CFL because they just weren't getting the opportunities in the NFL. But like, a lot of the quarterbacks that you see today, I mean, the quarterbacks that didn't get those opportunities, they were the forerunners. They were the models. Randall Cunningham, I mean, Randall Cunningham was doing incredible things as a quarterback when he played for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? It was long before Pat Mahomes, right? So, I'm really proud to be a part of the legacy of black quarterbacks who were signal callers for their teams.
Right. So transitioning to going to Northeastern, what was it like for you transitioning from Central Islip up to Boston? And of course, knowing the dynamics racially in
Yeah,
Boston with the various neighborhoods like Dorchester, Roxbury,
yeah.
Mattapan, and the surrounding areas.
Well, I mean, I didn't have a problem in any of those areas because those were the black areas. You know what I'm saying? Northeastern, no, Northeastern was an interesting experience for me. I mean, I love going to school there. I had my challenges, playing at Northeastern. I started as a freshman, true freshman. I played many games. I had some quarterback battles, competitions that I lost. Some say that it was because of my race. I think it was because of my race. I think if I was white, I think I would have been a starter for a much longer period of time, than I was. I was able to do some really great things on the field. You know, I think I was a field general. I was able to run and throw as a quarterback. But I was going to school. I was at a predominantly white institution, right? Over 20,000 students. Most of them were white students. Didn't have a whole lot of black players on the team. Um, I experienced racism, as a player, and so did many of my black teammates on that team. That's the truth. So, being a black quarterback during that time period was not an easy thing to do. Um, but I was able to take a lot of those experiences and just carry them over into the rest of my life.
Right. And myself being a PWI graduate from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, I could attest to being in a predominantly white institution where it's not a lot of us there and having to carve out little spaces and niches just to have a sense of home or familiarity. So it's definitely a unique experience when you look at that aspect. Now I want to
Yeah.
talk about
I'm going to
go
say
ahead.
this really quickly. I'm sorry, I just want to follow up with that and say I had a great experience going to Northeastern as a student. We had a African American studies department. We had the African American Institute. We had you know um, all kinds of social gatherings and events for Black students, not just at Northeastern, but all of the schools in Boston. So a lot of the Black students in the Boston area would hang out together, party together, go to different events together, and we were able to kind of come together around, galvanizing, issues or moments like the Rodney King beating, for example, and things like that. So, it was a really interesting experience going to a PWI, but I was definitely able to find my tribe when,
Yeah.
when I was on campus.
Yeah, definitely find your click. And also the hip hop scene around Boston. You had Almighty RSO, I believe that was Benzino's group
Crazy,
before
man. Crazy.
Benzino, and then Edo G and the Bulldogs. And then, of course,
Yep.
everything that came out of Boston there was right around the peak when New Edition was doing their thing
Yep.
as individuals with BBD, Ralph, Bobby, Johnny, and then, of course, New Kids. So
Yep.
everybody like to think Boston is sweet, but nah, it ain't sweet. You definitely got to watch where you move. But if you move with respect and don't bother nobody, you be all right.
Yeah, that's how I saw it and that's how I experienced it.
Now I want to talk about the intersectionality between music and sports. So right around
Mhm.
this time, you had UNLV that was doing their thing out in Vegas with the late Coach Tark. You had the late John Thompson and those Georgetown teams out in DC.
Yep.
You had the Fab Five out in Michigan. And then on the football side of things, you had what was going on in Miami at the University of Miami. And of course, the emergence nationally of Uncle Luke and everything that came out of Miami with Luke Records. So, what was your take when seeing all these things merging on and the old guard was trying to figure out, oh, we don't know what to do with this, we want everything to be still traditional button up and lace like USC, Notre Dame, Duke, and we're coming in more brash, aggressive, and you can't contain it. And we can also mention the five slammer jammer teams down in Houston with Akeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler and those guys as well.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, these were all teams that I identified with and rooted for, and wanted to win and wanted to see do well. I mean, I remember I was a huge Georgetown fan. I was a huge UNLV, Running Rebel basketball fan. You know what I'm saying? Even before, the Fab Five. You know what I mean? I just love those teams because they were unabashedly black and, they showed their ability on the field. They were unapologetic about who they were from a cultural standpoint. They helped to shape the game, define the game, change the game. And so, I always sort of identify with those teams more so than the Dukes and the Carolinas and Indiana and some of those other teams that you mentioned, because, they were unapologetically black, and it was something really powerful and really bold and really um brash, you know what I'm saying, about those teams.
It was definitely live and in love and color for the whole world to see.
Yeah,
As a Carolina fan, even though I hated Chris Webber making the timeout mistake, as a
yeah.
Carolina fan, thank you for that title. But I was hated that they ended up losing to Duke. Can't stand Duke. Only Duke players I acknowledge: Grant Hill, Christian Laettner
Right.
was a bad boy, Bobby Hurley, bad boys. But you got to give
Yeah,
them
I
their
mean, there's no question. I
respect.
mean, those are all great basketball teams, and those are great moments in college basketball history. There's no denying that.
Oh yeah.
But when Duke played Michigan, right? I was rooting for Michigan, or when
hmm
they played North Carolina, I was rooting for Michigan.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you had a chance to catch the Luther documentary, Luther Never Too Much, that just came
I
out.
have. No,
Oh,
I saw it. I saw it at a film festival, and I watched it at home with my family last weekend.
okay. I just happened to catch that myself, and it got me to thinking how I want to say 86, R&B and black radio at that time, it was very smooth, lush, plush, adult, because you had Luther,
Yeah,
Sade, Anita Baker, the
yeah,
list goes on. And then right around when '86 happened, you had the harder aggressiveness of hip hop meshing with R&B, which formed New Jack Swing, with Full Force, Key Sweat, Guy, I'll Be Sure, New Edition, Troop.
Mhm.
So what was that like seeing that shift when hearing R&B becoming more aggressive, having more attitude, and the look matching that compared to the smooth, lush styles and sounds of Luther Vandross and his contemporaries?
Well, I loved all of those eras of R&B music. I was a big Luther fan. I was just telling my sister the other night that, I remember going to bed and listening to WBLS, and I was talking to my wife about how, I used to go to bed listening to, you know, WBLS and slow jams at night, The Quiet Storm, New York After Dark, listen to those slow jam songs that some of which you've mentioned. It was a beautiful time and a beautiful era. And I remember going off to college and just sort of growing up, growing as R&B music was growing. I was a big New Edition fan. In fact, New Edition was my first concert that I ever attended. I went to go see New Edition and UTFO. That was my first a concert at in Westbury. So. I was there for all of that. You know what I mean? I mean, I was a big music fan, still am. And I used to it's funny now, man. I'm dating myself completely, as if the gray hair does frozen.
Yeah, so
You were frozen for a little while.
yeah. So you said New Edition was your first concert, and when you think of the modern day boy band, you tend to
Mhm.
think of New Edition and what they meant for the culture
Yeah,
individually and collectively, and
yeah,
set the stage for New Kids on the Block and every boy group to come after that, and they're still kicking butt, taking names there in Vegas with their residency, and I'm glad
yeah.
to see them getting their flowers now, all six. And then the New Edition story that came out in 2017 is still, to me, one of the best biopics I've seen in a long time, and is up there with the Jacksons and the Temptations as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. My father was a big Temptations fan, Four Tops fan, all of those, the Philly Sound, all of those groups that came out of there. That was my father's music, and when I was a little boy, I listened to that music too. But when New Edition came around, I made that transition, and they followed in the footsteps of the Temptations, and I still root for them, and I still follow them, to this day.
Right. And when you think about when Candy Girl dropped in '83, they
Hmm.
were really the first group R&B wise to really put rap in, and they were young. They were part of that first wave of generations of kids that grew up with hip hop. So it
Yeah,
was unique to see them take that, put that with the R&B twist, and Brooke Payne with the choreography of the Temptations, Whispers, Shy Lights, Blue Magic, giving it that new school feel appeal. Then you also had Foursome D's that was doing that same thing as well.
yeah, yeah, and that's why I always give Boston its props because Boston has produced some great music and great culture, and New Edition is prime among them. And what they've been able to do as a group, but then also what they've been able to do as individual artists, and also the subgroups. I mean, people talk about Belle Biv DeVoe, but then there was also Head of State with Johnny Gill, Ralph Tresvant, and Bobby Brown. They're just an incredible group, and they're all talented, and they're so professional. And when they hit that stage, man, it's on, and it's just like watching perfection. And so I just I just love watching them and other artists from that time period.
Hmm. And gotta also throw New Kids in there because a lot of people don't know New Kids at the core R&B
Mhm.
group. I mean, they came up performing at the Lee School, performing at the Dorchester Kite Festival, in and around Boston, really cutting their teeth. And once the whole pop scene came on, it was where, okay, we know what to do because we cut our teeth performing in urban areas. But
Yeah,
once the pop side came, it was over.
yeah. Well, I mean, they had the advantage of being white too. I mean, that was always the subtext, but I don't know if it was subtext. I mean, they were, a white boy band group that could do kind of what New Edition did. You know what I mean? And so,
Hmm. Hmm.
by definition, they had a much bigger, broader audience. What I like about New Kids on the Block is that, they give New Edition their flowers. They talk about how much New Edition influenced them, how much they looked up to them. So they give them their props. And so yeah, I mean, New Kids on the Block is another Boston group. I just kind of took it to another level.
Yeah. Now, for those in our audience who may not know the radio battles in New York back in the day between BLS and 98.7 Kiss, were you
Mhm.
Team BLS or Team Kiss with Mr. Magic, Marley Marl, or DJ Red Alert and Chuck Chillout? Or did
I would have to say, I'm trying to think back, but I would have to say, initially I was probably more BLS than Kiss, but then, once hip hop really hit the scene, I really became more of a Kiss FM guy, because I think Cool DJ Red Alert was on Kiss FM. Um, Trying to remember now because they've kind of gone back and forth, but I believe, Cool Red Alert was on Kiss FM and others. I think even well, Mr. C started on 90 Hot 97. I think it was another radio station that he started before that. But once not Hot 97 hit the scene. Then I kind of sort of gravitated more toward Hot 97 because they were almost always playing hip hop as opposed to 98.7. I think 98.7 sort of throttled back on the hip hop. So did BLS, even though they kind of dabbled in it a little bit. So, I would say WBLS. I love listening to the Quiet Storm. I think Kiss FM was New York After Dark, with the slow jams. And then Hot 97 was just like my hip hop station.
hmm Now, was there shifting to the film side? Was there a movie or a film director that
Mhm.
led you to say, "I want to get into filmmaking and I want to tell our stories raw, truthful, and unfiltered"?
Yes, Marlon Riggs, unquestionably. Marlon Riggs, I don't know if you've ever heard of Marlon Riggs, but Marlon Riggs is the reason why I became a documentary filmmaker. I took a class when I was a senior in college called Blacks in the Media and the Press, and I watched my teacher exposed our class to several films from Marlon Riggs, and they just made such a big impact on me, and I watched his films Color Adjustment, Ethnic Notion, um, some other films that he made later on, Black Is, Black Ain't, and I was just like, that's what I want to do. I want to make that kind of impact on young people. I want to make the same kind of impact on young people that Marlon Riggs has made on me. So Marlon Riggs is probably is a big one. My journalism professor was also an independent documentary filmmaker. His name was Andrew P. Jones. He taught me how to make guerrilla documentary films. He was somebody who shot, wrote, and edited his own documentaries, and so he taught me how to do that. Orlando Bagwell, who was also in Boston at that time, he made several documentaries. He made Africans in America, Frederick Douglass, When the Lion Wrote History. He made Malcolm X, Make It Plain, and a few other films. And also Black Side Productions. Henry Hampton. Who created Eyes on the Prize. Eyes on the Prize, and which is a landmark documentary series. Black Side Productions was 2 blocks away from my apartment in Boston after I graduated from college. I wanted to intern there. I worked a little bit for Orlando Bagwell, but I mean, I was right there with some of the best documentary filmmakers in the black documentary filmmakers in the United States at that time. Henry Hampton, Orlando Bagwell, Andrew P. Jones, who was an Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker. So, I kind of learned from them. They became my mentors, and they just kind of showed me the ropes.
Right. And this was also right around the
Hold on,
time.
I'm sorry. I gotta shout out this brother Calvin Lindsay, who worked, he was the producer of, I think it was called Say It Loud. And when became Basic Black,
Hmm.
WGBH.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So Calvin Lindsay, he was also a mentor of mine as well.
Right. And you mentioned all of the filmmakers that help you get your foot in the door. And this was also right around during the time when black cinema was really, I think, reaching the same zenith that it did back during the black exploitation era with the works like Melvin Van Peebles back in the 70s with Sweet Sweet Back Badass Song, all the Dolomite films, Gordon Parr Shaft, and then we see in the 80s, we see the emergence of Spike Lee with She's Gotta Have It, and of course, Do the Right Thing, all his later work in the 90s, and Fear of a Black Hat, directed by Rusty Cundiff, and so on and so forth. And of course, Robert Townsend, Hollywood Shuffle, classic. Now, coming into that space, did you already have a clear mindset of these are the type of stories I want to tell? Or did any of those filmmakers that help you get your foot in the door help shape the narrative that you want to tell?
Yeah, you can't leave out John Singleton either. I mean, John
Of
Singleton,
course.
his series of films were major at that time. Um, Matty Rich, is that was his name? Matty
Yeah,
Rich?
Matty Rich straight out of Brooklyn, and I think he did the
Yeah.
Inkwell as well.
Yeah. Did he do the Inkwell?
Yeah, I
Maybe
think
he
he did. I think he did the Inkwell.
yeah. Um, I really settled with documentary filmmaking. I just fell in love with the art form. I fell in love with the genre. There was something about telling nonfiction films that just really, I don't know, it just really pulled me in. You know, what I mean, I can't really explain why. I never really had a strong desire to make feature films or fiction films. I just never did. I just always loved, the craft of documentary filmmaking. I just love being able to put those pieces of the puzzle together and tell a story based on social issues. I mean, I think it's probably because, I'm really big into social justice and social justice issues. And so um, those are the stories that I wanted to tell. I wanted to be able to put social issues within a much larger, broader context, and be able to like unpack them and have people weigh in on those topics in a way that was going to help people grow. I was going to be transformative for the audience. So I used to be I was a journalism major when I was in college. And so I used to work at several news stations. So I did internships at WCVB in Boston, WHDH in Boston, WHDH, WCVB, and I forget the last one, but it was there were three of them that WB no, that's WBZ. No, I can't remember. But um, I did internships at, yeah, I think it was WBZ. I think in Boston, and I did those internships, and I would always gravitate to these news feeds, that would be up above, and we would have to watch. I was in the sports department mainly, but we'd have to watch and log like footage from these news feeds, and I remember always gravitating to the news feeds that had all this social unrest and things that were going on in the United States and around the world. And I just felt like TV news was too limited to actually get underneath those stories. And so that's one of the reasons why I gravitated to a documentary because you would take more time to tell those stories.
Right. And with Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes, what was that like for you taking apart hip hop, deconstructing the masculinity aspect of hip hop, and saying, how can we be able to show it in a light where it can have an honest, introspective look while holding the mirror and saying, some of this
Mhm.
stuff we got to change?
Well, that came out of my work working with the Mentors in Violence Prevention program, which is a program designed to train and educate boys to speak out, boys and men to speak out against all forms of gender-based violence. So so that was like sort of the other thing that I did that had a really big impact on my life and that helped to inform my filmmaking. So for many years, and I still engage in this work today. I spent a lot of time, working with, training, having and leading guided, facilitated conversations with athletes and other boys and men from all walks of life, talking about the things that we can do as men to help end violence against girls and women. And so I learned a lot doing that work. And it had a big impact on me personally, but I also saw the great need for that work. And so what I decided to do was sort of combine those two. So to to sort of create films that address gender issues, gender, race, and class issues. So my film Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes is sort of like I wouldn't say it's the culmination, but it's greatly informed by the work that I did with the Mentors in Violence Prevention program.
Mhm. And what was the feedback upon the premiere? And did you have any people say, "Man, I never looked at hip hop from this lens, and because of your work, I
Mhm.
got to change my viewpoint, how I view myself, and how I view women in this
Yeah.
predominantly male space."
Man, listen, I got so much incredible feedback from that film, and I still do. I mean, I'm still showing that film. I made that film finished. I completed that film in 2006, right? Premiered at Sundance in 2006. People are still showing that film. I still get feedback from people. I had one guy out in California come to me. It was like before it was he came to me backstage. I don't know how he got backstage or why he was backstage, but he told me that my film Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes literally changed his life. Literally changed his life. Told me that he was one of those rappers in my film, that were rapping about things that were intended to get them a record deal, but wasn't really truly who he was, right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, a lot of people have told me, that film has had a major impact on them.
Right, agreed. And now, what led you to make Soul Food Junkies? We got the post in the background. What
Yeah.
led you to make that film and talk about the issues of how food and the correlation of health affects disparaged communities?
Well, that film was really influenced by my father and my father's health challenges. My father got sick with pancreatic cancer, and I started doing research about what leads to pancreatic cancer and, how to sort of address it. And one of the things that I learned back then during my research is that a diet that is high in fat and high in sugar and salt and all of those things are things that potentially lead to um, pancreatic cancer. And so those are not the only risk factors, but they were high on the list risk factor. And also that African American people disproportionately develop pancreatic cancer. And so I thought that was very interesting. And so I started looking more into some of the causes of health challenges and health disparities between Black and white people and even Latino people, and discovered that our diet is chief among some of these preventable illnesses and diseases, that take place. And so that's what led to me making the film.
And as we know, because of the history of the through the transatlantic slave trade, they were given the scraps of what was left over, and you
Mhm.
made do with what you had, and you
Yeah.
have your food deserts in various areas where there's not a Whole Foods, there's a corner store, there's a McDonald's, Burger King, insert restaurant here, and that's all you have because everybody's hustling and bustling, going through day to day. And let me
Yeah.
just grab something quick and easy instead of fixing a nice, good, proper home cooked meal or growing it myself. So that way I know where the food comes from. But at least because with social media now and the information's out there, everybody's more aware and saying, I'm going to ditch this. I'm going to go all vegan. I'm going to go farm to table, grow my produce, go
Yeah.
kill it myself because I know where it comes from and health as well. So I'm glad that people are taking the knowledge now through social media and definitely through that film.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. My film Soul Food Junkies is one of the first um films about food that, explicitly um, sort of targets, a Black audience. Before that, it was Food Inc. There was another film called The Future of Food, but those films were seen mostly by white viewers, and I wanted to make a film that spoke directly to Black people,
Mhm.
and so yeah, so we did try to address, the history of soul food, not in a way to denigrate soul food, but just putting it into a much larger historical context.
Mhm.
Everything you said about, Southern food, being the food that, that was directly the product of enslaved Africans, right?
Mhm.
And, you know, certain foods that they were able to bring with them from Africa, or sort of take foods that were similar to what they knew, about in Africa, and were able to prepare those meals. It then became what we call soul food, but it was survival food for them. But the world has changed dramatically, since those days. And so, we just kind of unpack a lot of those issues in the film, and I'm proud of it, man. I love Soul Food Junkies. That's one of my favorite films.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite films as well, especially when you went to the tailgate and they had all the good food down at the
Everybody loves
tailgate
that.
and you're really getting your grub on.
Everybody,
So I really enjoyed that, man.
everybody loves that scene, man. People to this day. I had this one brother, this one friend from Boston who, no matter what I post on social media, no matter what I say, he always reminds me of that cauldron of pork that I ate on camera in Soul Food Junkies, man.
Yeah, man, and me being a Southern boy from North Carolina, I'm kind of familiar with all that good stuff, even though it's not good for you. It's good in moderation, but with a few alterations here and there. Now, I want
Yeah.
to talk about your hazing piece. I saw
Hmm.
the film, very well received, very good. Now, knowing, how secretive the world of Greek letter organizations are, was there
Hmm.
any pushback from people within that sphere saying, don't be putting our business out there and just saying, I'm going to tell the truth without unveiling too much of the veil because given the secretive nature of those organizations.
Yes. And there were also a lot of people within the Divine Nine who were very supportive of the film as well, who were very thankful that I made the film. The film gave a lot of people within the Divine Nine and other spaces outside the Divine Nine an opportunity to share their experiences, confront some of their trauma, confront some of their own behavior, grow and heal from their experiences. I did receive backlash. I've received backlash from members of my own fraternity, but I also received a lot of support from members of my own fraternity as well. So, it was a film that for me took a lot of courage to make because I knew that it was a taboo subject and that it was not necessarily something that, that we like to discuss publicly. But I felt compelled to do it, and so I did it, and I'm really happy that I did.
Right. And I believe you are a member of Omega Psi Phi. Is that correct?
There you go. You see it right there.
Yep. And every time Atomic Dog comes on, I'm telling you, people, move out the way. Whenever you hear that, start moving because somebody's gonna start hopping in just a minute. And although I'm not Greek, I have plenty of people who are Greek friends, family. My father's a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and just kind of seeing how those organizations were founded to build social camaraderie, networking at a time in spaces where we weren't allowed and all about academics, scholarship, brotherhood, sisterhood. And then when you look at on the IFC side of things, just how with some of the sororities, how some of those girls will spend up into the thousands of dollars to rush and just to get a bid. And to think that, man, the need and the want to be in one of these groups is very, very prestige because I know for a fact that when you go on the campus, I'm telling all you non-Greek folks, do not, under any circumstances, go to nobody's plot, go to nobody's tree, and for sure, do not wear any colors or nail that you got donated at Goodwill because you will get checked real quick.
Well, I detect no lies.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no lies there. So what was it like for you when you finally made it across, became a member of Omega Psi Phi and earned your keep in being a part of that brotherhood where you have illustrious members from various fields and saying I am one.
Yeah, well, I was really inspired by Jesse Jackson, who, if you remember back in during that time, I pledged in 1990. Jesse Jackson had just run for president. He ran for president in 1984 and again in 1988. And so, Jesse Jackson was a social and political phenomenon, an icon, and I was inspired by his leadership, and the leadership of many others in the organization, including my uncle, who was a scientist. My mother's brother was a scientist, Dr. James Carroll Hogan Jr. He was an Omega, and so I wanted to become an Omega because I wanted to be in the same company as those very highly esteemed men, who I really looked up to. So, once I became a member, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being a Q. I enjoyed being an Omega. But the thing that I really cherish and love most about my organization is our four cardinal principles: manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. Those principles mean a whole lot to me. It's not just words, on a piece of paper. It's how I try to live my life, and I try to epitomize those words. So, yeah, I'm an Omega, and I'll be an Omega until the day I die.
All right, well said. And shifting back to the hip hop space, I want to say this was right around 92, 93. From my young eyes being 7, 8 years old during this time when Dr. Dre, The Chronic, Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style was out, and then Warren G, everything that come after that. It felt like hip hop wise, everything was shifting to more of the harder, aggressive sound that was pumping out west in Southern California. But
Yeah.
prior to that big shift, you had De La Soul, Public Enemy, X Clan, Brand Nubian, all of those acts bringing positive images of Afrocentricity, being inclusive, one themselves. Because I remember seeing the African medallions flowing heavy as a kid. So, what do you think happened with that shift where we saw more of, the gangster rap, harder male, aggressive imaging, and you had the Afrocentricity, bright colors, and unity prior to?
Yeah, well, I was one of those young black men that wore African medallions, you know what I'm saying, and wore the kufis and, celebrated the Afrocentricity that was in hip hop culture. That was what I resonated with the most. Not to say that I didn't enjoy some of the more harder elements of rap music. I did, but I was definitely more aligned with some of the artists that were trying to use the music and the art form. To sort of address social issues and to uplift our community, so to speak.
Mm,
So when that shift began somewhere between like 1988, 89, 90, somewhere in that time frame. um I didn't really like it too much. You know what I'm saying? I saw the shift happening. I was there. I lived it. I experienced it. And I could see that there was something going on. And I could see that, as hip hop became more profitable for record companies, when corporations began to see the value of this cultural art form that they could disseminate to millions and millions of people and make a lot of money, millions of dollars off of it and disseminate it globally. Yeah, I had a problem with that. I had a problem with it because I saw what was going on. I saw the reasons why it was going on, and it seemed like there were certain aspects of black masculinity that was being embraced, even though hip hop was supposed to be subversive and hip hop was supposed to be sort of like this revolutionary art form. Many of the images and the themes reinforce some of the worst stereotypes about black men and black masculinity, right?
hmm
So, I was more aligned, with the Public Enemies and, the X Clans and Jungle Brothers and De La, some of those artists later on Common, when he became an emerging artist, artists like that, those are the artists, that I really appreciated the most.
Now, with acts from that era, what's your thoughts on Tribe Called Quest finally getting to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Well, I don't know if you can see, man, but I'm rocking this Tribe Called Quest joint right here.
Yes, sir.
It's great, man. I think it's a monumental moment in hip hop history, and I think that they're well deserving. I'm a Tribe fan. I mean, they deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I just Hall of Fame. I just wish that that Fife, could have been there to experience that moment. Of course, he lives on forever through his music. But how incredible would that have been if Fife would have been alive to experience that?
Yeah, definitely that. And you mentioned how, with hip hop being the world's most dominated genre of music, and how when you go globally, in other countries can't speak a lick of English, but they'll know a rap record, and seeing the imaging, the styling, the aesthetic, very much paying attention to what the trends and what the standards are here in the US.
Yeah.
And, back when hip hop first started, it was more about, speaking for something. And then when the dollars came in, it felt like it kind of got lost in the sauce, at least from my viewpoint.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it did, and I think that you know, that's just the story of hip hop. It's the story of black music, really. You know what I mean? And I think it's what happens when you don't really control the music, when you don't control the resources and you don't control the distribution platforms of the music.
hmm And speaking of, black artists in the music industry, talk about real quickly the legacies of Michael Jackson and Prince and how they bended rules, they didn't play the game, and they were trying to let everybody know, hey, own your
Mhm.
stuff, right, and just really drop nuggets and jewels and say, hey, this is not set up for us to win. It's like Vegas. The house always wins, and how they were bucking the system.
Consummate artists, but also intelligent businessmen and people who learned from their mistakes and, were able to articulate how to play the game and how to not allow the business side of the music industry to exploit artists, And so, you talk Michael Jackson and you're talking about Prince, you're talking about two of the greatest, black artists in history. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, I just think that, they're both of them are once in a lifetime figures.
Yep, definitely once in a lifetime. And when we had hip hop's 50th last
Mhm.
year, I was surprised to not see Hammer included. But when we look at what Hammer meant to hip hop and how if it wasn't for him going diamond with Please Hammer Don't Hurt Him, hip hop wouldn't have been able to move in that space of where, okay, we're gonna go from this side of the street to the
Yeah,
other side of the street. And I think more respect should be put on Hammer's name and what he did for hip hop overall in a broad sense.
yeah. Well, my understanding is that, Hammer was invited to participate in some of those tributes, but refused to do so or declined to do so because he felt that he had not been appreciated back in the day by many of the people who had reached out to him. I don't want to speak for him and I don't want to mischaracterize his reasons for not participating. But you're right. I mean, Hammer, he played a big role in sort of like the commodification of hip hop, the mainstreaming of hip hop culture. He was incredibly talented as a dancer. I think that he kind of got played to the left because he wasn't a lyricist, for hip hop purists, right? But you can't question the fact that he had a major impact on hip hop music and hip
Right,
hop.
right. And the
I
beauty
had
of
me, I had me some Hammer pants back in the day.
yeah, you probably had it in the closet too.
No,
I
I
watched
had
the
it. I wore them.
cartoon.
I got pictures with me with Hammer pants on.
Ooh, had the dolls and all of that stuff. And the good thing about hip hop was that it started out in New York, but it branched out in other parts of the country, and that gave it legs because if it was just New York centric, I don't think it would have lasted as it did. And when we talked about Luther Campbell earlier, if it wasn't for him going to the
Hmm.
Supreme Court, fighting for his right to be as nasty as he wanted to be on records and
Hmm.
saying, hey, this is free speech. You're not going to tell me what I can, what I can't say. And him being independent as well, coming out of Miami, and this was right around when everybody still looked at the South as y'all slow. You had what was coming out of Miami with Loot Records, out of Houston with Jay Prince and Rap a Lot, and the scene out of Memphis and Atlanta with Atlanta Bass, and how Luke really said, "Look, I'm gonna stand on this. Y'all gonna like it. Y'all gonna accept it, and I'm gonna do it my way." And that he did.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was challenging for hip hop purists like myself or New York centric hip hop artists who had a particular ear, for what hip hop was supposed to sound like and what it was supposed to look like, and what a dope MC was supposed to sound like. And I think that Luke and many other artists that you talked about from the West Coast, from Atlanta, from the Midwest. I mean, they challenged what was then conventional hip hop. I'll be honest with you. I mean, like Luke was not my cup of tea, but I also understand and respect the fact that his music reflected the culture where he grew up and where he came from, where he lived in Miami. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, I think that the beauty of hip hop, especially when you look back over the last 50 years and 51 years now, right? Um, you see it's like a tapestry, of all of these like, incredible artists, you know what I'm saying? Jermaine Dupri, what he was able to do and bring to the table from Atlanta, you know what I mean? Common, being from Chicago, Kanye being from Chicago, so many brilliant and great artists, from around, the country, man. It's incredible to see. J. Cole from North Carolina, you know what I'm saying? Like, incredible, incredible lyricist, man. I love listening to that brother. So yeah, I mean, but this is blackness, man. Blackness is beautiful. Blackness is brilliant. Blackness is, you know, it makes the world go round.
Yep, and two people who had the idea that black make the world go round and saw the money in it, Ellis Hayslip of Soul and Don Cornelius, of course, of Soul Train. Don Cornelius being where I'm gonna own it, I'm gonna produce it, I'm gonna fund it myself, and it's gonna be all us all the time. Black joy, raw, pure, uncut, uncensored. Can you talk about the legacy real quick of those two men and those two shows?
Again, two very iconic figures in black culture history. They go beyond black music. I mean, these were people who provided a platform for the country to see artists that otherwise were not given an opportunity or platforms to present themselves as they were, right? They didn't have to conform or they didn't have to code switch to be who they were. I mean, just watching the documentary Mr. Soul by Melissa Hayslip, who was Ellis Hayslip's niece, I believe. I mean, that was such a powerful, powerful documentary, and that show was just so crazy, yo. I mean, that show had every black artist from every black walk of life that you can imagine, and it was unapologetically black. You know what I'm saying? It was phenomenal. And of course, Soul Train, you know, people from my generation talk all of the time that, every Saturday, we woke up, we did our house chores, and we listened to or watched Soul Train, on television every single Saturday. So,
Mhm.
people still doing the Soul Train line, and it's because of the vision and the leadership of Don Cornelius.
Right. Rest in peace, Don Kennedy. And this past Kennedy Center, the Apollo got honored with the Kennedy Center honoree. And we all know the legacy, the rich history of the Apollo, and how
Yeah.
if you go on that stage for amateur night, I'm going to tell you from personal experience, you better
Mhm.
be good because they'll let you know.
Right. That's right. Or you will be ushered off of the stage.
Yeah, I got a chance to rub the log. I got through the first verse before I heard it.
Right.
So I just clapped myself off the stage, walked it off. But that was a good experience for me. But just to say, I stood on the stage where so many greats have stood, where so
Wait,
many
you were on the Apollo?
on the regular Wednesday amateur night where they had the open cattle call. So quick little backstory. So I auditioned when I was 15 and
Okay.
a bus that drove from North Carolina to New York so that we could be in line at 8 a.m. for the cattle call. So I went in, sang a little bit. They liked it, said for me to
Uh-huh.
come back. Came back a couple months later, did okay. Ended up
Hmm.
meeting up with G Dep outside of the backstage because he was performing that
Okay.
night, playing for him, and he liked what he heard. So I thought that did okay for a kid from North Carolina to go up there and do his thing. But just for me, just to be on that stage and say, man, I watch Showtime at the Apollo regularly, and to say
Hmm.
I stood on the same stage as James Brown, Aretha Franklin,
Yeah.
Ray Charles.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, that was just good enough right there
Got you.
for
That's
me.
dope. That's dope. That's a dope story.
Yeah. So one more thing I want to hit you with before we close. Any current projects that you're currently working on that you can speak on for right now?
Yeah, well, I have one film that we just finished. It's a short film. It's called Men of Courage, and it actually addresses the issues that I spoke about earlier. It's about five black and brown men in the state of New Jersey who are working in their local communities to disrupt generational cycles of gender-based violence. So that's a new film that'll be coming out shortly, within the next several months. Um, and then I have two films that are in development with Hulu, and I'm waiting to see whether or not those projects are going to move forward through their greenlighting process.
Okay, so once the ink's dry on those other things, you got a spot to come to. So before we wrap, any shout outs you want to give?
Oh, I want to shout out my wife. I want to shout out my daughter, my sister, Tandra Hurt, my mother. This is important. I want to shout out my brother Trevor Montgomery from Central Islip. Uh, my brother Trevor Montgomery, unfortunately and tragically, passed away on Saturday, this past Saturday. And Trevor, for many, many years, was my type man. And um, yeah, I'm gonna miss him. I'm gonna miss him. If the world feels different without him in it.
Yeah, sorry for your loss. My condolences to you and the family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah. And you can catch this interview wherever you stream podcasts and on the official YouTube channel at youtube.com/beyond the album cover. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big thank you, a round of applause for Mr. Byron Hurt for coming on the podcast. Mr. Hurt, thank you for coming on and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you very much, man. And your hip hop knowledge, your pop culture knowledge, your sports knowledge is very impressive.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to set it straight for 88, like Kara West once said, you suckers. Peace.